So is this current version or this old version of yourself, is it making you happy? Then you have to ask yourself, what is it protecting? Once you have those two very honest conversations with yourself, you're then able to put yourself at a starting place. And to be honest with you, David, some people could be very happy where they're at. If you're in a place where you're looking to make a change in any area of your life, ask yourself those two questions, those very simple questions. Is your current state making you happy? And second question is, what is it protecting?
And welcome back, folks, to the Coachful Coaching Leadership Podcast. This is David, and today I am here with Dwayne Smith. Dwayne Smith is the host of the What Changed podcast, and it's about moments that shift everything and the self-leadership it takes to move through them. On the show, he has real conversations with professionals about the experiences that challenged them, forced change, and shaped how they lead themselves and others. He also writes publicly about DEI and inclusive leadership in his Demystifying DEI series. That's my brief bio introduction of Mr. Dwayne Smith. Hello, sir. Welcome to my podcast.
David, I am happy to be here. How you doing?
I am doing very well. It's been a week since I appeared on your podcast for the first time.
It is. It has been. And look at that. I love that quick churn around. That means we have built a very good synergy in a very short amount of time. So I'm happy for this.
Yeah. Well, to my fellow Canadian here, I don't have to translate Celsius or Fahrenheit or anything like that. So it's good to talk to another Canadian once in a while.
Yes.
So I'm going to dive right into it. Like tell the audience a little bit more about yourself, right? And it seems like you're on this mission to uncover self-leadership and what drives that. So can you talk more about that?
Yeah. Well, I've been in leadership for over 20 years, and I've always been fascinated with learning, self-development. It's always been a part of my DNA. I remember, I tell this story a lot. Then when I was young, my mother used to give me toys, and, I'd play with whatever toys I had, and anything that was electronic or moved on its own. About a week into getting it, I found my way inside of it. Either I would screw it open or I would rip it apart. And my mom would always get furious. She stopped buying me toys at a very young age because I always wanted to understand how they worked. And I've always grown up with that sort of mentality of how things work. And when I first entered into leadership, 23 years ago, and I use the word leadership cautiously because I wasn't a leader. I was in a leadership role, but I was a manager. And I leaned into that management role. And I really discovered during that time how bad of a leader I was. And I didn't know during that moment. It wasn't until reflective periods later on. But I wasn't really a good leader. I was a manager. I managed people through systems, through policies, through power, through authority. It was my title that was my leading indicator. And when I look back at it, there's a part of me that doesn't regret it because it was a learning experience. And I realized that I was trying to really present myself in a certain way. I was trying to ensure that the people who put me in this position recognize that they made the right decision. And throughout that, I wasn't forming my own sense of identity, my own self, ability to lead people and to really influence people. And it didn't, it really shone the light on me until probably about 2 years in. And I had an associate with me that started to break down those walls of management that I had up. And when I say that, I mean from the fact that I wasn't bringing my personal, authentic self to work. I was leading with my title and my manager position when I walked in to the facility. And I remember this associate was just so keen on getting to know me, so keen on asking about my weekend and wanting to know my personal life and wanting to know what drives me and what inspires me. And this level of connection made me feel uncomfortable because they were actually chipping away a wall that I thought was necessary to maintain respect and authority and power in my role. And during that time, I started to, over a period of time, started to decrease that defensiveness. And what I realized, the more I was open with this individual, the better they performed. And it got to a point, David, which really, and it stuck with me because I remember, we rarely remember things people say. We remember how they made you feel. So I say that because I remember this exact moment for what was said and how I felt. And I was doing my manager duties, but I was also taking on a little bit of their role as well, thinking I was helping out because they were salespeople and I was stepping in and helping them. And I remember the one day that associate came to me and they asked, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm helping you with sales." And they said, "Don't worry about that. We'll drive the sales. You take care of your management and the business." And it just really hit me at that point. I was like, wow, they really recognize my ability to be a good manager, but they're also saying, hey, you don't need to worry about us because you're creating an environment where we're thriving. Continue to focus on that environment. And that's when I realized I was now moving into the fray of becoming a leader. That was
Mhm.
my first indication. And so I started to reflect and I was like, what was going on up until that point in my career? Like, what was I doing? And that's when I realized that a part of what they opened up out of me was an internal, I guess, wall that I had up that I didn't really identify. My identity was really wrapped into the management title, and they got me out of that position. They got me out of that headspace and they helped me expand to understand that that relational side of leadership was so important. So that, David, is when I got into my routine of leadership. And I realized that I can't give to others unless I give to myself first. And what I knew I needed to give to myself was how to become a better servant leader, how to become better at being relational, communication, building rapport, connection, driving behavior through influence. And these are behaviors and things that I needed to develop. So that continued and still continues to this day. But then I became a very successful leader, started developing people, getting great results. And then I just kind of naturally over the past couple of years just been really focused on the fact that I believe that leaders don't learn how to be leaders externally. You learn how to be a leader internally. And what happens externally is the manifestation of the things that you've taught yourself. And my last point to this, and it's such an interesting journey for myself, but my last point to this is what I've learned in the conversations that I have on what changed on my podcast is that it's how do people move from knowing to doing? And this is the part that I want to explore, especially with emotions and identity and comfort that keep you fixed in a certain situation like I was. I was comfortable being a manager and the emotions of expanding beyond that were scary. So I stayed fixed. But it's that ability to change. What are those things, those events or those behaviors that need to really come to the surface for you to change? And I realize it's not about the behaviors. It's about the identity and how you see yourself. So I really want to
Mhm.
explore that on how people see themselves and do they have a strong enough why? Do they have a vivid enough picture of themselves to understand that there's behaviors that will be lagging that could get them there, but they have to do that self development first.
So, what were the beliefs about yourself that you had to challenge or let go of in order to move past just being an operational manager to an actual people leader?
I didn't believe I can influence people with relationships. My identity was through operations. It was through systems, it was through policies. I think a lot of it too, David, if I go back to my upbringing, I went far enough back and I realized that that was a big indicator of the type of manager that I was going to be because the discipline that I grew up with was very rigid. It was very specific and I was never really good enough at some of the things that I did. Simple, silly things like cleaning your room, for instance. And my parents would go back in there and they'd be like, well, you didn't do a good enough job. And I know how that now has related to me now being an overachiever, not believing that I've done enough, even when I've accomplished 100 or
Hmm.
110%. I always believe I could do more. But I didn't see myself as somebody who can gain the respect, gain the achievement, gain the success if I built relationships with people. I believe that that part, if I opened up myself to that human part of the environment that I was in, that would in some way kind of erode my ability to manage people and get results.
That's interesting. So, I guess what was that turning point that changed your mind?
It was that moment that I talked about earlier. It was that moment when that one employee, when I was doing their job, and I realized now I was doing their job because I was trying to get it perfect or trying to get their role perfect. And they probably knew it at the time. And I think it was part of them saying, you don't have to worry about that. We'll take care of this. You just continue to create an environment. And then that's when I realized, David, something very important, that you can't motivate people. You can only give them an environment in which is motivating. That was the turning point for me. And I realized how much your environment plays a role in the change that you want to create.
Yeah. It's interesting because I was actually reading about that recently, like about people who want to be happier.
Yeah.
Okay. And now there's a lot of elements to that. A lot of it is internally, right? Like your own beliefs and such, right? And there's a lot of work that you need to do there. But it's also, are you in an environment that is going to foster and allow you to change in the way you want to change so that you could be happier or more successful, whatever that means to you. So I'm interested I'm interested in your point of view on that, the environment, because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who are doing a lot of self-work, doing a lot of self-leadership, but they may not be in an environment that is going to allow them to excel. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. It's a massive role. Your environment, I like to think of the environment from an inside out perspective. It's like the environment first within your mind. What is the story you're telling yourself? How are you interpreting the things that are happening around you? And then when you look externally, is what structurally in that environment either supports or defies that internal thought that you have. So I'll give you an example. If I want to stop drinking, internally from my mind, I got to create an environment in my mind to say, I don't want to stop drinking. I want to become a non-drinker. There's a difference. Okay. Because if I tell you, David, if you talk to me, we're talking for the first time and you say to me, hey, Dwayne, do you want to drink? And I say to you, no, I quit drinking. And you're going to say, okay, you're going to respect that. But if I say to you, no, David, I don't drink. So there's two things that are going to come to your mind at that point, right? First, if I say I stop drinking, the first thing that's going to come into your mind is, okay, there's something that has happened that has
Mhm.
caused him to stop drinking.
Yeah,
And it doesn't have to be,
you were drinking before.
yeah, I was drinking
Yeah.
before. In your mind, and depending on our relationship, you may engage a little bit more and you want to know, tell me. But for the most part, you're going to be a little bit more trepidatious now because you're thinking, okay, it could be as serious as alcoholism. However, if I say I don't drink, that actually eliminates a lot of that forethought, in terms of, okay, I wonder what happened, right? It's just like he just doesn't drink. Okay, great. The difference between those two is one is I'm telling you about a behavioral change. I stopped drinking. That's a behavioral change. The other part I'm telling you is my identity. I don't drink. We are less inclined to be curious about somebody's identity in that moment versus curious about the behavior change. I wonder what happened. So if I remove that out of my own mind by creating an environment in my mind to say, I'm not a drinker, then that's going to trick my mind and trick my belief system to believe that, okay, I'm not working on willpower and a behavioral change. I'm working on being this identity, being this person that my future self recognizes is already here.
Yeah.
So that's where I think the environment is important from an internal aspect. Then externally, it's structural. I got to take the alcohol out of my house. I got to take the bottles out of my house. And if I have full bottles, I got to give those bottles away or sell them on whatever. I don't think you can even
I'll
sell
take
them
them.
online, but I'll give them to your friends or give them to your neighbors, right? So it's that structural, ability or inability that is going to cause your success to either happen easier or it's going to be more difficult. So that's where I look at environment, David. I really look at it from that self internal standpoint. It's how do I see myself and how do I see myself in comparison to my environment? And then also where in the environment is supporting that sense of
Mm.
self and where it isn't, what am I doing to change it?
So you're describing there the interplay between behavior and identity, right? One is, this is who I am, or this is who I'm going to be. And the other one is, this is kind of what I do. right?
Yes.
Like, what are some of the stories you hear people tell themselves, or you've heard people tell themselves that keeps them stuck in a certain behavior and or identity?
I think it's the question between when I hear people and the conversations that I've had, there's these two differences. It's either they're in this place of how do I force myself?
Mhm.
So then it becomes a challenge. It becomes a greater journey to achieve whatever it is or make the changes that they're trying to make. Or the more internal work that I heard people say is, what am I protecting? So it's very interesting when you look at those two things because one is more future perspective. It's like, I'm forcing myself to do this. So for instance, going back to the drinking example, I'm forcing myself. When I say when I stop drinking, if that's my statement, now I'm forcing myself to become that person. That takes an extreme amount of willpower because, again, we don't yet see ourselves as that person. So, what I've learned from a lot of people that I've spoken to is that it's more about doing that internal work and asking yourself, okay, what am I protecting by staying the same? What is it that's comfortable about what I'm going through right now that is just safe enough for me to say, yeah, but things aren't that bad,
Mm.
or I could keep safe in this space. And that's what I've noticed is kind of like the biggest distinctions is understanding what you're protecting by staying the same or putting yourself in a position by telling yourself you have to force yourself to change. And I think that's where a lot of people fail, especially when you talk about New Year's Eve goals and resolutions and things like that.
Get me started on that.
That's it. But that's a great example. So many people are forcing themselves to not only come up with these resolutions, but to execute them. And they fail. But I think that important, more in-depth question that they need to ask that's going to give them a better understanding of where they're at and what they need to do is what am I protecting by staying the same?
Mhm. Yeah. I I've worked with people who you would very nicely point out, look, your behavior, here's what it's doing to people. It's dragging other people down. It's giving people the perception that things suck everywhere, even though it doesn't. You know, what we call the Debbie Downers or whatever the heck you call them nowadays, that's appropriate. I had a response given to me of, that's just who I am, Dave. And there's a lot to unpack with someone like that. That's just who I am. I'm like, okay. And come to think of it now, the better question to follow up there would have been, what are you trying to protect by being who you are? Right? That would have been a very interesting question to that person. I guess with that said, like in your travels, in your podcast, what changed? So we talked a lot about change and how people change. How has that changed you?
I can tell you every conversation that I have with every guest changes a bit a part of me. And what I've realized is change is a foundational element, I think, in a lot of people's lives, and they don't recognize it. And I didn't recognize it. And what I mean by that is if you're able to apply discipline to one area of life, that ability to apply discipline can be extended to other areas. But at the same time, if you're unable to apply discipline in one area of your life, the same can be true for other areas. And what I've learned is that we're all made up of so many different parts, so many different identities, right? We are fathers, we're husbands, we are sons, we're daughters, we're wives, we're sisters, we're a whole bunch, friends, colleagues, coworkers, bosses. There's so many parts of us. And then those things are in relations to other elements. All those things that I mentioned, they're in relation to other people. But then internally, we have our own identities. We have our belief systems. We have our mental states. We have our spiritualness. We have our physical outlooks. We have our emotional outlook. All of these things make up who we are. And what I've learned in these guests, because I've spoken to people who are mental health doctors, we've spoken to people who are parent specialists, I've realized that there's so many areas in our lives that we need to learn how to lead. And self-leadership is not just an extension of careers, but it touches every area of your life. Nutrition. wanting to eat better, wanting to eat well, that's a self-leadership trait. If I'm able to develop a habit that puts me in the best position to eat the best nutrition, then I can use that same skill set, that blueprint somewhere else. How do I use that to become better at my administrative tasks at work? Because I apply it, right? Again, the output is different,
Hmm.
but the application of the way you process the idea, the plan, the strategy to do this for yourself are things you need to recognize. And I realize there's so many things that I'm doing well, but then there's a lot of things I'm not doing well.
Hmm.
I'll give you one example, homework, for instance, with my daughter. I was talking to one of my guests, Brian Post, and he talked about he's a parent counseling specialist, and he talked about homework because this is something I was really interested in. And he was talking about homework with kids. And I would always say, like, my daughter would be so fascinated to be online for 24 hours a day. She could be on her iPad. But the minute I sit down with her, her dad to do her homework with her, she just automatically goes into tears. And I go into frustration. And there's just this push and pull, right? And it's like, it's not a pleasant experience for either of us. But I remember Brian's response, he's like, "Why would they be excited?" Right? Because going on their iPad is a dopamine hit. Sitting down at the table with their parent doing homework is a cortisol, hit. And it wasn't fun. It wasn't fun for her and it wasn't fun for me. And he went on to talk about just make it fun. He didn't believe, and I totally agree with this, that homework shouldn't be brought home anyways. School should be for school, and parents are going through so much that they shouldn't have to worry about doing homework with their kids when they have to cook, when they have to clean, when they have to prepare the household, when they have to run the kids out to their recreational events, etc. They have to take care of work stuff. There's so many responsibilities, and this, I think, is another load to shoulder, especially. And I will make a side note, David, the way they're teaching things like math these days are different than when I was growing up. So that adds an extra layer of complexity to the
Yes, I
homework.
agree. 1 + 1 is equal to 0.5 plus 0.75 plus 0.2. It's like I just made that up, but it's some weird
It's so
stuff.
weird, right?
Yeah.
It's so weird when I have my daughter sitting, looking at me saying, "Dad, she didn't teach it that way." And I'm just like, "Well, how did she teach it?" And I'm just like, "Okay, now I'm going online trying to understand this new way while I'm sitting at the table with her doing math." But,
Is
I
it
say
actually
that
faster? Is it actually
it's,
faster?
you know
Like,
what? You know what? It's all relative, right? It's hard to say it's faster when you already know it so well one way, and now you have
yeah.
to take the time to learn it another way. So I'm going to say it's not faster in my perspective, but all that to say, what helped me in that conversation was that I remember going into the next time that I did homework with my daughter, and I'll never forget this. And I went in with the mentality, I'm gonna make it fun. And one of the things Brian says is like, I don't sit there waiting for them to get the answer. I'll just give them the answer. I said, you know what? I'm going to do the same thing. So when my daughter was stuck on a certain question, I would just work through the formula with her and give her the answer. And I'm like, I'm just going to do that. And I had more fun. She had more fun. And you know what happened, David? Literally, she went out and she did her test. The next day, I think it was on a weekend. So the next day on the Monday morning, she went and did her test. She got her marks 3 days later and she got nearly perfect. And it was one of her best grades that she got.
Mhm.
And that was such like a really good validating moment for me. And I realized like, oh my gosh, like I just changed my experience. The way I walked into this situation with her doing homework, she had more fun. I had more fun. I didn't have the same guardrails up where it's like, you got to get to the answer. I'm not going to help you. It's like, I just gave her the answers and look at the results that happened. And it changed since then. It's changed the way I've done homework with her. And since then, she hasn't had a single tear every single time we've done homework together. So what I've learned in a lot of that, and not just in that situation, is having patience, having grace. I've learned a new ability of collaboration. I've learned a new tolerance of not condemning people for not having the answer when I work with them. And these are all important traits that I've been able to take into other areas of my life and my career.
Yeah. I guess where in your life that you see you need to make more fun so that you can learn better right now?
Wow. That's a really, really good question. When I think about that, probably, and this is probably a very inconsequential, maybe not what David was expecting, but reading, for
I thought
me,
you were going to say you like cutting toenails or something like that.
yeah.
I would have respected it either way.
I know, it's like, how do you make the most mundane physical act exciting? Well, go to a spa and let somebody else do it. I've done that once. I've got a pedicure once and it was phenomenal. Definitely go back again.
I've been tempted by my wife to go to do a pedicure. She's like, "You'll enjoy it." I'm like,
Have you
"Really?"
ever done one?
No, I haven't.
David, do it. Do it. I had a friend who did it.
You heard it here first, folks. Dwayne Smith
I'm telling you,
told me to get a pedicure.
go get a pedicure. I'm sorry I waited so long to get one, to be honest with you, because it is such a great therapeutic, relaxing session. And I did go with my daughter. We both got pedicures. We didn't get matching pedicures. She did all the gel and all that other stuff and the painting. I didn't do that stuff, but I just wanted a straight up, like, just cut my toenails and massage the feet and put it in that water you do and let the jets go. And it was such a
I think
great
I'll get a good
experience.
ROI. I'm going to get a good ROI.
David,
Trust
do
me.
it. David, do it. It's such a great.
I might
it's
not
such
be
a great
allowed
feeling.
back.
I don't know if I'll be allowed back too. Yeah.
Sir, you
think I left
destroyed
a
all our
mess, but
equipment.
I know it's like that scene from Dumb and Dumber when they
They go to Home Depot to get a sander.
they got the sander, electric sander going. It was a great, but anyways, it was a great experience.
Reading,
Yeah, I
reading.
don't even know how we got there. Yeah, so it's like reading.
No, you said it was something very mundane. I thought it was like cutting your toenails.
I feel
So
like we're now
anyways.
getting into some foot content type of conversation, which is
That was our
that's gonna
off-camera stuff.
that's our off-camera stuff. That's the stuff that goes viral.
Yes, we were talking about revenue generation opportunities.
Yeah. So, but it's a good
Reading.
place if you want to start. Yeah. Reading for sure. I've never found reading fun. I read often, but I've never enjoyed it. I've read due to a necessity to move away from television, media. And again, I tend to always want to have ambient sound around me. So when I wake up in the morning, I put on something, whether it's a podcast or whether it's something on the television or something, but I just always need sound, and I hate being in a quiet, empty house. So reading, I can't read with sound. So that was the biggest challenge for me, is reading without sound around me. Those times where you read and you're reading a page and you finish the page and then you ask yourself, you're like, what did I just read? Like your mind just totally goes off into different things, right? And it was just never fun because I want to really get the author's message. I really want to get the stories. I really want to get the deep understanding of what I'm reading. Otherwise, I'm just kind of grazing through these words on a page. So it's never really been fun for me. And I've been trying to make it more fun now by understanding a little bit more what my identity is currently and what this book is going to do to help me either reinforce that identity or help me expand on my identity. And because I've been able to do that, I've been able to do that in a way where it's like now I'm only buying books that are important to me in the moment, in the space that I'm currently in life. Before, I felt I was just buying books because it was like, this looks like something I want to develop. And yes, I read a lot of nonfiction. It's a lot of development. I can't read stories. Typically, I can't read a lot of fictional stuff. But it was it's a lot of nonfiction. But I'm finding different things that are important to me and where I am in my life. And one of the most important books that I bought, because I've just been diving into it so often, is Susan Cain's book, Quiet. And it's about being an introvert and how to be an introvert in a world that celebrates extroversion. And that was important for me because even doing a podcast and speaking is more of an extroverted type of activity. But I've always resigned myself to be somebody who likes solitude, who likes to move away from the crowds and whatnot. But as a leader over 20 years, I've had to present, I've had to be in front of large groups, and I have no problem doing that. But it's draining and it takes a lot of energy. So I wanted to find a way how to balance it, how to embrace it more and be more excited about those moments. So I bought Susan Cain's book, and it was such a really good read. And I was able to really connect it really intimately to what I was feeling and what I was going through at that time. And that's how I discovered reading could be fun, because then I discovered things in that book that really made me more confident
Hmm.
and more accepting of being an introvert, being in the space that I'm in as a podcast host, as a leadership speaker, etc. So these are things that I have to really be very cognizant about, especially when it comes to reading. So I'm starting to say I like reading now more.
Yeah, yeah. And when it comes to reading, like I'm reading a little bit more now, but I don't put a pressure. Like, and it's always something relevant to where I am now, so I'm more likely to read it. But I also don't pressure myself anymore. If I'm reading just one page today, it's one page. If it's 2 pages, it's 2 pages. By the time I hit the third page, and my wife will tell you this, I fall asleep if it's in the middle of the afternoon. I don't know why. For a good chunk of my life, when it came to reading, especially nonfiction, I would fall asleep. Like I would get very tired very fast. Uh, the alternative, well, because of that, my adaptation was I've learned to skim through things really quickly and get salient information that I need. Right. So I got really good at that as a young kid. But yeah, so reading, it's enjoyable because I don't force myself to read a certain amount. If it's 1 page today, if it's five, there's days if I hit 10 pages, that's an amazing day. But there's no pressure I put on myself to
Can
read.
I ask, how well do you feel that you retain the information that you're reading?
It's okay. Again, I don't put the pressure on myself to retain it the first time. I used to, right? Like in school, yeah, because I needed to be efficient. But the beauty of the technology we have today, like especially like Gemini and ChatGPT, is that I could be in the moment and enjoy it in that moment. But by the time I get to the next chapter of the book, I'm not going to remember what happened in the previous chapter. So guess what? I'll just go back to Gemini and I'll ask, "Hey, what's the gist of this?" Right? And guess what? Oh yes. Oh right. Okay, I remember that now. I remember in that chapter what that was about. So I don't feel guilty about that. I'm there to enjoy it. And how do I feel at the end of at the end of my reading of it? I feel good. That's all that matters. If I need to learn, I can always go back and find something. So yeah, you know, it's just like a vacation. Did I see everything in the scenery the first time I passed by? In Hawaii, probably not. But you know what? I'll go back again, right? And I have. So I try to put less pressure and less of the white knuckling at
Yeah,
this point in my life.
I like that.
So last question to you, Dwayne, for all those listening right now who are wondering what are one or two steps I can take today on changing, what would you suggest?
That's a hmm, one or two steps. I think the first thing is maybe ask yourself, and these again are very internally focused, is the old version or the current version of yourself, is that making you happy? This old version, this current version. And the reason why I say that is because if you are looking to change, if you're looking to build on something, if you're looking to move into a new journey, what is it about your current self, your old habits that are keeping you comfortable? I think that's the first thing. Recognize those things. And those are the things you have to be honest with yourself. And it takes a lot of humility. It's not easy. And the second question is, what is this habit protecting me from feeling? So this current version is protecting you from feeling something different. What are you like? What is that? And I think once you ask those two questions, so is this current version or this old version of yourself, is it making you happy? Then you have to ask yourself, what is it protecting? Once you have those two very honest conversations with yourself, you're then able to put yourself at a starting place. And to be honest with you, David, some people can be very happy where they're at, and that's totally fine. The change is not consequential. It's not important for them, and that's totally fine. But if you're in a place where you're looking to make a change in any area of your life, ask yourself those two questions, those very simple questions. Is your current state making you happy? And second question is, what is it protecting?
Right. Two solid steps to get change started. All right, my friend. Well, it's been a good time chatting with you, Dwayne. Anything else you'd like to share with the audience before we go around what you're doing right now and where to find you?
Yeah, right now I'm just doing my podcast. What Changed the podcast? You could find me on YouTube, and I'm on all the audio platforms. Dwayne Smith. And, really for anybody who is in that in between season, who is looking for a place where they could think out loud with people who've lived it. I love to not just talk to professionals from their leadership framework, but I love to talk about their lived experience, what got them to that leadership framework. And that's where the juice is. That's where I think many people who are listening to my podcast will be able to understand what internally it will take for them. What are the sacrifices? What are the opportunities it'll take for them? So, that's what my show is really about. And, I'm helping myself through change every day. I by no means have reached the destinations that I've wanted to in a lot of areas of my life. So every conversation I have just helps me understand a little bit more about where I'm at and what it will take for me to move forward. So I just hope I'm able to give that to other people as well.
All right, Dwayne. Well, thank you very much for sharing that. And thank you very much for joining me so quickly after having me as your guest on your podcast. Hopefully, people will tune in when we publish this very soon. So, everyone, thank you very much for joining us today. And if you like this, like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Dave.
That's a wrap on this episode of the Coachful Coaching Leadership Podcast. I'm David Fung, and my mission is to help leaders grow, lead with impact, and build thriving teams. If you found this valuable, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a fellow leader. Until next time, keep leading with purpose.